Alright, so I finally have the updated speed running version of my ultimate Poison Blades build that I showcased a couple days ago with a 5-minute run of a tier 100 dungeon. But that was right before patch 1.1.1, and since then we've had a few things we've had to adjust for, right? For example, the mob density, as well as bursting venoms not working like it used to. So now, from what I understand, it is now working correctly. So again, we've had to make a few changes to account for that. Can we still speedrun certain dungeons? Probably. Can we do 5 minutes on all of them? Probably not. It is very dependent on the mob type and the dungeon itself. However, what this build really allows you to do is to take on just about any dungeon. And I think that's the crucial part. I've been trying to get to this point for a while now, while using Poison Blade specifically. I believe I am finally at that point with this build. It is fairly safe, fairly tanky, amazing DPS, no gear swap really needed to take down bosses, but you can always gear swap if you want to make your life a little bit easier. In fact, I do gear swap when fighting very specific mob types with certain affixes that are fairly hard to deal with, and I think that is one very crucial point about you being able to undertake just about any dungeon, because you will face those lightning enchanted, fire enchanted that are sometimes very hard to deal with. And even if you initiate with one of my favorite combos, which is concealment and poison trap, you will sometimes trigger certain elites that are really hard to deal with, but it is not impossible to do it without any gear swapping at all. I will also have a tier list for you guys that is going to basically compare all the tweaked versions of this build that I've been trying, so that we can better determine what they're really good at or what they excel at, and then what they're not so good at, as well as a basically a list of all the dungeons that I've completed at tier 100 since patch 1.1.1 so far. Okay, so in today's video, I want to go over the gear, the stats, all that good stuff. So all that said, let's jump right in. So let me first start by explaining how the build works. We're using concealment with poison trap and the infiltrator aspect to initiate fights. This allows you to completely lock up packs of mobs instantly. Then we follow up with our twisted blades and the poison imbuement to deal our damage. You will notice that I drop Death Trap and instead am using Shadow Step. This could be Dash. I've tried both. They both kind of do the same thing, but I prefer Shadow Step for the unstoppable portion of it, as well as the ability to target specifically the mob that is the most dangerous in a pack of mob. But overall, that is the gist of the combo. You rinse, repeat, and you can usually follow up with the next pack of mob fairly easily. But this, with a few adjustments to our passives, our gear, and our aspects, is overall the best version of the Ultimate Poison Blades that I've come up with. Now for the gear and stats, we're sitting at 13k attack power, so this is a pretty big change compared to our other builds, and it all has to do with pretty much just the Paragon board. All right, so our gear has not changed that much. The aspects have, but the gear itself has not really changed, so this is huge. All right, so we've been able to get a lot more power, as well as even more armor. I will probably make a dedicated video for the Paragon board explaining most of this, but for now, this is what I have. I'm not going to spend too much time because the builder or the planner will be in the description below, which is going to have kind of like the perfect version of what I would want on my gear, but let's still quickly go over it. For the helm, we are still using the Umbris. Basically, the all stats here is a little bit useless right now because of the way my gear is set up. We have too much. We're aiming for 630 or 20. Roughly for your strength and intelligence, okay? As for the chest piece, it has not changed. I am using topaz now instead of the rubies because even with 2 sources of unstoppable, sometimes it's not quite enough. So I found that this helps me survive a little bit longer when I'm getting CC'd, because it does happen. As for the gloves, we are still using Frostbitten. The pants, we still have Disobedience. The boots, we're now back to Penance and Greaves, and I'll explain that in a second. It's because basically we changed our heart, all right? Or the Wrathful Heart more specifically. As for our crossbow, we've had a nice little upgrade. So we've removed the crit damage because we are using poison. Crit damage does not work on our ticks, therefore you do not want that on your gear anywhere. We have also moved the accelerating aspect to our crossbow, simply because we now need to trigger another aspect for our poison imbuement to reset more quickly, which has to do with basically our basic skill. All right, so more attack speed is better. I've also heard that apparently Getting more attack speed can push the threshold of the Twisting Blades rotation. Not quite sure exactly what you need or how much extra speed you need, but basically if this was at 50%, it would be even better. And then we have on our amulet now the corruption instead. Okay, so that was one swap that we've done, and you will notice that we are now permanently using the creeping death. This heart is by far the best one for dot damage. So if you want to do Uber Lilith as well as tier 100 dungeons without having to swap heart, this is the one to use. So the other one was great for the all imbuements, but it didn't quite have enough damage to kill packs of mobs fast enough. So I settled with using this one instead, and this is why we've had to use Penitent Greaves to get our chill effect so that we can keep using Frostbitten for our AoE freeze. All right, as for the rings, we still have Bursting Venoms, and we are using the Stun Grenades. Sorry, basically this is for Frostbitten to work. All right, so all of these kind of work together so that we can get our AoE freeze. And then for the stats on this one, again, no crit damage. As for the other ring, poison damage, once again, we have our Twisting Blades, and then we have the one where we have damage suppressed by 20%. And then the AoE portion of this, the damage, we do not really care about it, but we do like it for the AoE vulnerable because of the exploit glyph. This can work against you sometimes when you initiate a fight in concealment with poison traps, and then this triggers. You then have a little bit less time for your combo with the vulnerable because it only lasts for 3 seconds, but still overall this continues to be one of the best ones to use. And then for our weapons, we've had to drop Ashiras because we now have to use the Pestilent points. This is how you're going to reset your poison imbuement a little bit faster because of how Bursting Venom now works. As for the stats on this one, this is one of the pieces I still need to upgrade on my gear, and in fact even this one, it is a sword. I prefer daggers for the extra attack speed, but at least this one has some reasonable stats on it compared to the other ones that we've had before. As for the specialization, we are still using combo points. This is by far the best one for added damage, and it is also the one that we use for Uber Lilith. Now for the skills, a couple things have changed here, but minor things. We're obviously still using Puncture, Twisted Blades, Sturdy, and Siphoning Strikes. Then we have Shadow Step here, and we've got 1 point into Rapid Gambits and Trick Attacks. We're not using Dash, but if you would want to use Dash, you can. You can take your 3 points, let's say from here, and put them into Dash, for example, and you can do Dash and Concealment. I've also seen Shadow Step and Dash. I've seen Dash and Smoke Grenades. So again, there is a lot of little differences or tweaks you can do to this build for it to work, but I continue to work with Concealment as much as possible. I've just removed the 2 passives. All right, so these are good, but they're not exactly needed because we have the AoE vulnerable like I just explained. Okay, for the Poison Trap, one change because of now how Bursting Venom works, we've went with countering Poison Trap. This is a hit or miss. However, because we use Concealment and we have our 4 Poison Trap charges, we basically have a pretty decent chance at resetting our Poison Imbuement when we come out of stealth. So fairly good, but not necessarily perfect. All right, then we have obviously Poison Imbuement. We now have 3 points into Debilitating Toxins, as well as Deadly Venom, 1 point into Alchemical Advantage, which works nicely when you're in a pack of mob, but maybe not so much when you're facing bosses. We have Precision Imbuement and Trap Mastery, and yes, we've dropped Weapon Mastery because the extra damage that we would get, for example, from the crossbow, crit strike damage, does not really work for us, and we've decided instead to try and get even more crit rate. All right, simply because we need to trigger a crit lucky hit, and then we have a 10% chance of Bursting Venoms to apply. We're also trying Alchemist's Fortune for a little bit more lucky hit, for again more energy generation, but also for the Bursting Venoms. And then the rest down here is pretty much the same, but here's where we've made a pretty important change. We've dropped Exposure. We're now working with Close Quarters Combat because we don't have Ashiras. So we get a nice boost to our attack speed, but also to our damage against crowd-controlled enemies. Therefore, we're able to really completely annihilate packs of mobs. I have tried, and you may prefer to run Momentum. Momentum is fine. you can definitely run this one if you, for example, run an attack speed potion, which would almost put you on par, pretty much put you on par with this one, but you would get an extra 20% increase damage reduction, and that is pretty important. You could also, if you're going to run momentum, you could experiment, and I've tried it myself, to drop the Umbris. Sounds crazy, but you could drop Umbris and instead run the Stolen Vigor. This is the one that allows you to heal when you have stacks of momentum, and it's over 1,000 per second. This is really, really nice. A lot of survivability from this one aspect, but ultimately I settled with the extra attack speed and damage because, again, that's the one that we use for Uber Lilith. One more quick note is about this amulet right here that I'm using. Like you saw in the beginning, when I'm facing certain mobs that I have a hard time dealing with, where if you stand in place for too long, you're most likely going to get hit by that lightning or that fire damage. So that little 7.5 seconds of an immunity bubble is huge to just take care of that one specific type of mob. All right, so I do hot swap to this piece when I'm fighting those. Now for the Paragon board. Again, I will make a dedicated video for this because I've learned a lot of things recently, and I kind of want to go over it step by step with you guys to explain why I've done the changes that I've done. Okay, but for now, let's just go over the glyphs and the boards. So we've got on the starter board, versatility for the bonus to magic nodes, and then on the exploit weakness, so you will see that it's a pretty much a complete redo compared to my other ones. We now have the control. After that, we've got our closer in the cheap shot, followed by we've got the diminish in the cunning stratagem. Then we have our tricks of the trade, which is now a little bit later with the devious, and then we go up into our no witnesses with the efficacy, and finally we finish with a 7th board, which is our deadly ambush with the exploit. Okay, so this is overall the best that I found to really maximize on our stats, so strength and intelligence, minus my helm that has a little bit too much right now. So if I were to remove my helm, for example, right, I'm still within those values of where I need to be, basically to get all the benefits of my last 2 rare nodes on the no witnesses, so on my 6th board. You could shuffle this around for, let's say, I don't know, tricks of the trade to be later on, and you could get away with sacrificing, for example, some intelligence where you would lose some damage for maybe from this node, or maybe you would not care about you know, the damage from this one, although this one is so good, so you definitely want this one to be maxed out. But yeah, so there's a couple ways to do this, but I found that aiming for 620 of strength and intelligence is fantastic overall. Then on our 7th board, this is where we're losing the extra bonus, but the extra 4% damage reduction from enemies affected by trap skills is not something I care about as much, so I'm more than happy to sacrifice this 710 strength. All right, but overall, this is the gist of the board. One quick note of a change that I would do, or that I do, is to swap out exploit for Bane, specifically for Lilith. This is about the only change that I would do for Uber Lilith, on top of a few gear swaps. But overall, this is the new Paragon board setup, 7 boards, and then the new glyphs that we are using to maximize our stats, as well as more specifically our attack power and life. You will see that on the planner that I've updated for Uber Lilith, we have over 15k attack power before being buffed for specifically Lilith, with a little bit less armor, whereas this one on the planner, you will see that we're at about 10,000 armor, but the planner doesn't include the armor that we get from the heart, so it's basically over 10,000 armor, and then we get the extra 30% from disobedience, which puts us, if I understand correctly, at the cap for tier 100 dungeons. So there you go, guys, the gist of my new speed running build for tier 100 dungeons. I say speed running, although, like I said, I employ the term loosely, but I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Is it finally at a point where you guys think that this is the best version of it? If you have any tips and tricks, do let us know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.